Lefty.
Hello, Rusty.
Lefty said you checked in. How you been? What'll it be?
Fine beer.
Opening, They Were Expendable wasn't just a war movie. It was a war movie made during the war, by men who'd actually fought it. The director left mid-shoot to go back to combat. The star had commanded real PT boats under fire. And one scene, the lead actor wasn't acting at all. He was reliving the worst night of his life. These are 20 weird facts about They Were Expendable. And buried in the chaos, a handshake between two men that said everything words couldn't. Battle stations. This one hits different. Number 1. Robert Montgomery wasn't just playing a PT boat commander, he was one. Before stepping onto the MGM set in 1945, Montgomery had spent 3 years in the actual Navy, commanding Motor Torpedo Boat Squadron 3 in the Pacific Theater. He'd faced Japanese destroyers in the dark, evacuated MacArthur from Corregidor, and survived kamikaze attacks off Guadalcanal. So, when John Ford offered him the role of Lieutenant John Brickley, Montgomery didn't see it as acting. He saw it as testimony. During the first read-through, Ford noticed something strange. Montgomery kept correcting the script, not the dialogue, the technical details. The way officers gave orders, how crews handled emergency repairs, which hand you used to salute in combat conditions. Ford, who'd filmed actual battles as a Naval Reserve officer, didn't argue. He rewrote scenes on the spot, incorporating Montgomery's lived experience into every frame. What emerged wasn't Hollywood's version of war. It was memory, translated to film. Montgomery delivered his lines with a quiet exhaustion of a man who'd already lived them. No heroics, no speeches, just the weight of command and the knowledge that most of the men he'd served with weren't coming home. In a cast full of actors, Montgomery was the only one who didn't have to pretend. Number 2. John Wayne wanted to serve. He tried to enlist multiple times during World War II, but a combination of age, family obligations, and studio pressure kept him stateside making war films while real soldiers fought overseas, and he never stopped feeling guilty about it. When he arrived on the set of They Were Expendable, that guilt was written all over his face. Robert Montgomery noticed immediately. Here was Wayne, Hollywood's biggest war hero, standing next to a man who'd actually commanded boats in combat. The tension could have been brutal, but Montgomery did something unexpected. He treated Wayne like a fellow officer. Between takes, Montgomery walked Wayne through actual PT boat operations, showed him how commanders moved, how they thought under pressure. He never mentioned his own service, never made Wayne feel small. He just taught, and Wayne absorbed everything, desperate to get it right, to honor the men who'd actually done this. Ford watched it all unfold and made a choice. He didn't ask Wayne to be a hero. He asked him to be human, uncertain, scared, trying his best in impossible circumstances. What you see on screen isn't John Wayne the movie star. It's a man carrying the weight of other men's sacrifices, doing everything he can to be worthy of their story. And in the film's final moments, when Wayne's character salutes the flag, there's something in his eyes that transcends acting. It's respect, earned the hard way. Number 3. John Ford didn't finish the movie. Halfway through production, with scenes still unshot and the ending incomplete, Ford received orders to return to active duty with the Office of Strategic Services. He was needed for the final push against Japan. The studio panicked. They had millions invested, a half-finished film, and their director was about to disappear into a war zone. Ford didn't hesitate. He walked onto set, gathered the cast and crew, and explained he was leaving in 48 hours. Then he turned to Robert Montgomery and said 6 words that changed everything. You know what to do. Montgomery had never directed a film in his life, but he'd commanded men under fire, and Ford trusted that more than any Hollywood experience. For the next several weeks, Montgomery stepped behind the camera, finishing scenes Ford had planned, maintaining the tone, the pacing, the raw honesty that made the film different from every other war picture being made. He didn't try to mimic Ford's style. He just told the truth, the same way he had when Ford was there. When Ford finally returned months later to review the footage, he barely changed anything. Montgomery had understood the assignment perfectly because it wasn't about making a movie. It was about bearing witness. And when They Were Expendable premiered, Ford made sure Montgomery received co-director credit, an almost unheard of gesture in 1940s Hollywood. because Ford knew what audiences didn't. Without Montgomery, the film would have died on the cutting room floor. Number 4. The PT boats weren't props. They were the real thing, borrowed from the Navy and operated by actual sailors who'd served in the Pacific. MGM spent months negotiating with the Department of the Navy, trying to convince military brass that using genuine combat vessels for a movie was worth the risk. The Navy finally agreed on one condition. If war broke out again, the boats and crews could be recalled at a moment's notice. So every day of filming carried an undercurrent of uncertainty. These weren't movie extras playing sailors. They were combat veterans, operating the same boats they'd fought on, performing the same maneuvers they'd executed under enemy fire, and it showed. When the boats roared across the water in formation, when they executed high-speed turns to evade imaginary torpedoes, when crews moved with practiced efficiency through emergency drills, it was all real, no acting required. Director of photography, Joseph August captured it with documentary precision, treating each scene like actual combat footage. The result was something Hollywood had never achieved before. Not a recreation of naval warfare, but naval warfare itself, performed by the men who'd perfected it through blood and survival. When sailors in theaters watched They Were Expendable, they didn't see a movie, they saw Tuesday. And that authenticity, it became the film's greatest strength and its heaviest burden. Because once you've shown war as it actually is, you can't unsee it. Number 5. Donna Reed thought she was making a romance. When MGM offered her the role of Lieutenant Sandy Davis, an Army nurse stationed in the Philippines, Reed prepared for a typical Hollywood war picture. Brave soldiers, touching love story, happy ending. She studied her lines, practiced her accent, planned her emotional beats. Then she arrived on set and realized she'd walked into something completely different. John Ford and Robert Montgomery weren't interested in Hollywood romance. They wanted to show what war actually did to people, how it ground them down, how it forced impossible choices. Reed's character wasn't there to be rescued or to provide emotional support for the male leads. She was there to survive, to work, to face the same impossible odds as everyone else. Ford pushed her hard, demanding take after take, stripping away any trace of movie star glamour until all that remained was exhaustion, determination, and fear. In the film's most devastating scene, Reed's character says goodbye to Wayne's character, knowing they'll probably never see each other again. There's no kiss, no dramatic declaration, just two people acknowledging the reality of war. Reed later said she'd never felt more exposed on camera, more vulnerable, more real. And when the film premiered, critics praised her restrained, honest performance. She'd come to make a romance and ended up making history. Because sometimes the most powerful love story is the one that never gets to finish. Number 6. John Ford lost his eye during filming. Not literally, but the injury that would eventually cost him his vision started on the set of They Were Expendable. During a particularly complex action sequence involving explosions and gunfire effects, Ford stood too close to a special effects rig. Something went wrong. A piece of debris or shrapnel from a controlled blast hit him directly in the face, damaging his left eye. The set went silent. Medics rushed in, and Ford, bleeding, waved them off and called for another take. I had directed the rest of the scene with one eye swollen shut, refusing medical attention until the shot was completed. The studio sent him to doctors who warned the damage was serious, that he might lose vision permanently if he didn't rest. Ford ignored them. He had a film to finish and a war to get back to. He wore a patch between setups, took it off for directing, and never once complained. Years later, that injury would progress, causing Ford significant vision problems, and eventually requiring multiple surgeries. But in 1945, on a Florida film set recreating the fall of the Philippines, Ford treated it like any other combat wound. Bandage it, ignore it, keep moving. Because in his mind, this wasn't just filmmaking, it was duty. And duty didn't stop for pain. The eye patch he wore in later years became iconic, a symbol of old Hollywood toughness. But it started here, in the chaos and danger of a war film being made by men who couldn't separate art from combat.
Coast Guard.
Number 7. The opening scene was shot at dawn, one take, no rehearsal. John Ford wanted to capture something specific, the exhausted beauty of men who'd been awake for 36 hours straight, the way light looks when you've forgotten what sleep feels like, and so he kept the cast and crew working through the night. No breaks, running scene after scene until everyone was stumbling, until the distinction between acting and reality blurred completely. When the sun started to rise over the Florida coast, Ford called for the opening shot. Robert Montgomery and John Wayne standing on the dock, watching PT boats prepare for patrol, saying nothing, just existing in that liminal space between night and day. The camera rolled. The actors didn't perform. They just stood there, genuinely exhausted, genuinely uncertain about what came next. And Ford captured it. That moment became the film's thesis statement. War isn't dramatic speeches or heroic poses. It's tired men doing impossible jobs because someone has to. The cast thought Ford was crazy, pushing them to the edge of collapse for a single shot. But when they saw the footage, they understood. You can't fake that kind of weariness. You have to live it. And for one Florida dawn in 1945, everyone on that set lived it together. The scene lasted less than 2 minutes on screen, but required 18 hours of preparation, of exhaustion, of breaking down every Hollywood instinct until all that remained was truth. Ford never apologized for it. He just said, that's how it was. And he was right.
Filmed with the cooperation of the United States Navy.
Number 8. They built an entire base that was designed to be destroyed. Production designers constructed a detailed recreation of a PT boat base on location in Florida, complete with docks, barracks, fuel depots, communications equipment, everything a real naval installation would have. They spent weeks building it, getting every detail right, making it functional enough to operate as an actual base if needed. Then John Ford announced they were going to blow it all up. The destruction of the base in the film's third act wasn't going to be suggested or implied. It was going to be real, complete, and captured in a single sequence with multiple cameras because they only had one chance to get it right. Special effects crews wired hundreds of explosive charges throughout the installation, timing each blast to create maximum visual impact while ensuring no one got hurt. On the day of the shoot, Ford positioned 7 cameras at different angles, all rolling simultaneously, all capturing every angle of the destruction. He gave the order and the base erupted. Buildings collapsed, docks splintered, fuel tanks burst into flames, everything they'd spent weeks building disappeared in minutes. The cast stood watching, genuinely stunned by the scale of destruction. And Ford just smiled because that reaction, that stunned silence, that was the point. War doesn't preserve, it erases. And he wanted audiences to feel that erasure, to understand what it meant when everything you'd built, everything you'd fought for, vanished in smoke and fire. The scene made it into the film exactly as shot. No special effects, no editing tricks. Just one perfectly orchestrated moment of controlled destruction that captured something essential about war's indifference to human effort.
They Were Expendable is a powerful document of fact.
Number 9. Robert Montgomery had nightmares during filming. Cast members would hear him in his hotel room at night, shouting orders, calling out names of sailors who hadn't survived. He never talked about it during the day, just showed up on set, performed his scenes with quiet professionalism, and disappeared when cameras stopped rolling. John Wayne noticed first. He'd been Montgomery's roommate on location and heard everything. The thrashing, the screaming, the long silences after Montgomery woke up and realized where he was. Wayne didn't know what to do. He wasn't trained for this. He was just an actor pretending to understand combat, sharing a room with a man who couldn't stop reliving it. One night, after a particularly brutal nightmare, Wayne found Montgomery sitting on the balcony, staring at the ocean. Wayne sat down next to him, didn't say anything, just sat there until Montgomery started talking. He told Wayne about the night they evacuated MacArthur, about the boats they'd lost, about the men who drowned in the dark while he kept giving orders because that's what commanders do. Wayne listened, and the next day, when they filmed a scene where Montgomery's character loses a boat and crew, Wayne saw something different in Montgomery's performance. He wasn't acting grief. He was channeling it, transforming personal trauma into something that honored the men who didn't make it home. After filming wrapped, Montgomery checked himself into a VA hospital for what we'd now call PTSD treatment. The studio kept it quiet, but everyone who'd worked with him knew. They Were Expendable didn't just tell a story about war. For some, it was war, revisited frame by frame. Number 10. The handshake in the final scene wasn't scripted. John Ford had written a formal ending, military protocol, salutes, the works. But when they got to the last day of shooting, to that moment when Montgomery's character says goodbye to Wayne's character, knowing one is heading to safety and the other is staying to fight what will probably be a losing battle, Ford saw something in the actors' faces. Real emotion, real respect, the kind that transcends dialogue. So he killed the lights, cleared the set of everyone except the camera operator, and told Montgomery and Wayne to just say goodbye. No script, no blocking, just two men acknowledging each other. The camera rolled. They looked at each other. Wayne started to speak, stopped. Montgomery extended his hand. Wayne took it. They shook once, firmly. No words necessary. Then Montgomery turned and walked away. Ford called cut. The crew stayed silent. Even the hardened technicians who'd seen everything Hollywood could manufacture recognized they just witnessed something authentic, something that couldn't be performed or rehearsed, only lived. That handshake became the emotional climax of the entire film, more powerful than any explosion, any battle scene, any dramatic speech, because it acknowledged what everyone who'd served already knew. Sometimes the hardest part of war isn't fighting, it's leaving your brothers behind. And in that moment, Wayne and Montgomery weren't actors anymore. They were just two men carrying the weight of everyone who'd ever had to make that choice. Number 11. The film's most talked about scene almost got cut entirely. There's a moment midway through when Montgomery's character breaks down alone in his quarters after losing half his squadron. No dialogue, no music, just a man sitting in silence, trying to hold himself together. Test audiences didn't understand it. They wanted action, not introspection. Studio executives called it slow, depressing, box office poison. They demanded Ford remove it. Ford refused. He told them flatly that if they cut the scene, they could take his name off the picture. Montgomery backed him up, threatening to walk away from all future MGM projects. The standoff lasted weeks. Finally, Louis B. Mayer himself watched the footage and made the call. The scene stayed, not because he loved it, but because he recognized something in Montgomery's face that couldn't be manufactured. Real pain, real loss, the kind audiences needed to see, even if they didn't want to. When the film premiered, that scene played in dead silence. No one coughed, no one moved. And when it ended, the silence continued for several seconds before the next scene began. Critics called it the most honest moment in any war film made to that point, because Montgomery wasn't performing grief, he was offering testimony. Number 12. Ward Bond's character dies halfway through, and Bond was furious about it. He'd expected a hero's death, something dramatic, maybe saving his crew or going down fighting. Instead, his character simply gets killed during a routine mission. No speeches, no heroics, just there one moment and gone the next. Bond complained to Ford repeatedly, arguing the death had no meaning, no purpose. Ford let him rant, then explained that's exactly the point. War doesn't give you dramatic deaths. It doesn't care about your story arc. It just takes you, randomly, senselessly, and everyone left behind has to keep going. Bond wanted to quit. Ford told him to try it. So Bond stayed, played the death exactly as written, and created one of the film's most devastating moments. Because the audience had grown to like his character, had expected him to survive, and his sudden absence left a hole that never got filled. After the film wrapped, Bond admitted Ford was right. Making death meaningless was the most honest thing they could do. Years later, veterans would tell Bond they appreciated how his character died, because that's how their friends had died, without warning, without glory, just gone. Number 13. The Navy tried to stop the film's release, not officially but through quiet back channels and pressure campaigns. Some admirals worried the movie was too defeatist, showing American forces in retreat, losing battles, barely surviving. They wanted Hollywood to make films about victory, not defeat, even if the defeat had actually happened. John Ford, still in uniform with the rank of captain, told them to back off in terms that can't be repeated here. He argued that hiding the truth dishonored the men who'd fought those losing battles, who'd held the line when everyone knew the line couldn't hold. Robert Montgomery, also still technically active duty, backed Ford completely. Together, they made it clear. Either the Navy supported an honest film about real sacrifice, or they'd go public about attempts at censorship. The brass backed down. When They Were Expendable premiered, it was introduced at several screenings by actual PT boat veterans, who explained to audiences that, yes, it really was that bad, that chaotic, that heartbreaking. And the film's honesty, its refusal to sugarcoat defeat, became its greatest strength, because victory is easy to celebrate, but showing dignity in defeat, purpose and sacrifice, that required courage of a different kind. Number 14. Donna Reed broke her ankle during the evacuation scene and finished the sequence anyway. The scene required her to run across uneven terrain while carrying medical supplies, dodging explosions, moving with panicked urgency. During the third take, her foot caught on debris and twisted hard. Everyone heard it crack. Reed went down and Ford yelled cut. Medics rushed over. Reed looked at her ankle, already swelling, looked at Ford, and asked how many more takes he needed. Ford said they could finish it tomorrow after she'd been treated. Reed refused. She knew the adrenaline was real right now. The fear was real, and if she stopped, she'd lose that edge. So they wrapped the ankle, gave her something for the pain, and kept shooting. You can see it in the final cut, the way Reed moves with a slight limp. The grimace that's not quite acting. It made the performance more powerful, more desperate, more real. When Ford saw the footage, he felt guilty for letting her continue. Reed told him to stop apologizing. She'd chosen to finish because that's what her character would have done, what the real nurses had done. They didn't stop when they got hurt. They kept working until they physically couldn't anymore, and Reed wanted to honor that. Number 15. The film's premiere was attended by actual survivors of the Philippines campaign, men who'd served on PT boats under Lieutenant John Bulkley, the real officer Montgomery portrayed. The studio thought it would be good publicity. What they didn't expect was the silence. These veterans sat through the entire film without speaking, without reacting, just watching their lives played back on screen. When the lights came up, several were crying. Not dramatic sobs, just quiet tears, the kind that come when you remember things you've tried very hard to forget. One sailor approached Montgomery afterward and said 5 words that stuck with him forever. "You got it exactly right. Not the action, not the dialogue, but the feeling. The exhaustion, the fear, the desperate humor, the love for men you knew were going to die." Montgomery later said, "That moment meant more than any award, any review, any box office success, because the men who'd actually been there, who'd actually lived it, recognized their story, and that validation from the only people whose opinion truly mattered justified every choice Ford and Montgomery had made." Number 16. John Wayne broke down during the final scene, and they used the take. Not the handshake, but the moment right after when his character watches Montgomery's boat disappear toward evacuation, while he stays behind to fight the inevitable. Ford kept the camera running longer than usual, just watching Wayne's face as he processed what staying behind meant. And something cracked. Wayne, who'd spent the entire production feeling like an imposter among real veterans, who'd carried guilt about not serving, who tried so hard to honor men braver than himself, just broke. Tears came. Not movie tears, real tears. The kind that hurt. Ford didn't call cut. He let the moment play out, capturing something raw and honest that Wayne couldn't have performed if he'd tried. When they finally stopped rolling, Wayne apologized, said he'd ruined the take. Ford just shook his head and walked away. Later, in the editing room, Ford made sure that moment stayed in the film because it wasn't Wayne crying. It was every man who'd ever had to watch his friends go into danger while circumstances forced him to safety. That guilt, that helplessness, that desperate wish to trade places, Wayne channeled all of it into one unscripted moment that became the emotional anchor of the entire film.
Number 17. They filmed in the exact same waters where real PT boat battles had occurred.
The studio had offered to recreate everything in California. Safer, cheaper, more controlled. Ford refused. He wanted the actors to feel the same waters, see the same horizons, understand what those men had faced. So they filmed in the Florida Keys and the Gulf Coast, in channels where American boats had run patrols, where some had been sunk, where sailors had drowned. Some locations still had wreckage visible beneath the surface. The cast found it unsettling, knowing they were literally sailing over grave sites, performing scenes in places where real men had died. But Ford insisted. He believed the location held memory, that water and sky and wind remembered what had happened there. And whether you believe that or not, something about filming in those actual places changed the production's energy. Scenes felt heavier, more consequential. Actors found themselves looking at the horizon differently, imagining searchlights, enemy ships, the desperate math of impossible odds. Robert Montgomery said, later he'd felt ghosts watching, not malevolent, just present, bearing witness, making sure their story got told right. And in a strange way, filming where it actually happened became the production's way of paying respects. Number 18. The studio wanted a happy ending. Ford gave them the truth. In the original script dictated by MGM executives, Montgomery's character successfully evacuates, reunites with Wayne's character, and together they lead a victorious counterattack. Triumphant music, American flags, the works. Ford read it and laughed. Then he rewrote the ending completely. Montgomery evacuates not to victory, but to an uncertain future. Wayne stays behind to face defeat. There's no reunion, no victory, just survival, and the continuation of a war that's far from over. The studio fought him. Test audiences found it unsatisfying. But Ford stood firm because the real PT boat veterans didn't get happy endings. They got reassignments, new battles, more loss. And honoring their service meant honoring the reality that sometimes you fight, you lose, and you keep fighting anyway. When the film premiered with Ford's ending intact, some critics complained it was too downbeat, too grim. But veterans understood. They didn't need Hollywood to give them a victory they hadn't earned. They needed recognition that losing with honor meant something too, and Ford gave them that. Number 19. The film bombed at the box office initially. Audiences in 1945 were exhausted from war, wanted escapism, wanted to celebrate victory. They didn't want to watch a film about defeat, even honorable defeat. They Were Expendable opened quietly, closed quickly, and lost money. Studio executives felt vindicated, told Ford he should have made it more commercial, more heroic. Ford didn't care. He'd made the film for a different audience, one that wouldn't fully exist for decades. And he was right. Over the years, as new generations discovered it, as film scholars recognized its honesty, as veterans recommended it to their children and grandchildren, They Were Expendable grew. It became recognized as one of the greatest war films ever made, not despite its refusal to celebrate, but because of it. Film schools taught it, directors studied it, veterans showed it to their families when they couldn't explain what service meant. The film that failed in 1945 became essential by 1975, timeless by 2000, because honesty has a longer shelf life than propaganda. Number 20. John Ford never watched the completed film. After finishing post-production, he was immediately deployed overseas again, this time to document the occupation of Japan. By the time he returned months later, They Were Expendable had already premiered, played its theatrical run, and mostly disappeared. Friends asked if he wanted to see it. Ford declined. He said he'd already seen it, lived it, made it. Watching it on a screen couldn't tell him anything he didn't already know. For the rest of his life, through dozens of films and countless accolades, Ford never sat through a complete screening of They Were Expendable. Robert Montgomery asked him about it once, years later, wondering if Ford regretted anything, wanted to change anything. Ford just smiled and said no. The film existed. The men it honored knew their story had been told. That was enough. He didn't need to watch it because he'd never stopped living it. Every film he made afterward carried its weight, its lessons, its commitment to truth over spectacle. Bonus fact: the film's title came from real military terminology. Expendable was what the Navy called units expected to take heavy casualties in exchange for strategic objectives. PT boats operating in close to enemy positions with minimal armor were classified as expendable. The men who crewed them knew it, accepted it, volunteered anyway. When Ford chose that title, the studio hated it. Too dark, too honest, too much like admitting defeat. But Ford kept it because those men had earned the right to be called what they were. Not heroes, not victims, but expendable. Men who knew the cost and paid it anyway. Men who understood they were trading their lives for time, for strategy, for other soldiers' survival. And in calling his film, They Were Expendable, Ford gave them something Hollywood rarely offers: the dignity of honest nomenclature. Years later, Robert Montgomery said the title was perfect because it acknowledged what every veteran already knew. Sometimes being expendable is the highest form of service.